I just got off the phone with DA Ed Marsico, and I want to update you on where we stand with regards to the building collapse on Derry Street that occurred last evening. As you know, a family was displaced from its home, a family of 6 individuals. We have done 2 things. We immediately today issued a condemnation order to property owner Ronald Wiest, who lives locally. It is an order which requires within 5 days for the building to be torn down. It's the strongest action we can take on a from a code standpoint. We have also requested, and I have personally requested of the DA, that he bring the charge of reckless endangerment against not only this property owner, but the other property owner. It is my contention that speculating in unstable properties, and this property was purchased at a tax sale, in instances where the property owner clearly knows that the building is unstable and falling apart. This building has been marked with an X by the fire department for years, and it was condemned previously, and we can talk about that in a minute. But that type of speculation is reckless, and not fixing up those properties is not something that we are going to tolerate, and bringing a misdemeanor charge of reckless endangerment is the appropriate charge to bring in this instance, as the building did collapse, did displace a family, and frankly, it could have even been much worse. It is, however, up to the DA to bring those charges. And the DA's position is that the issue is currently under investigation, and that they haven't made that decision yet. It is not as clear a case as in other cases where there is a long paper trail and an individual has a lot of advance notice. I believe a big X on a property you buy at a tax sale, one that is clear to everyone in the vicinity and to anyone's eye is in danger of falling down, should be notice enough. But there isn't a large paper trail with Mr. Wiest. And that is in part due to the fact that we have this phenomena in Harrisburg that these properties change hands very quickly and routinely at tax sales. And one of the issues that we would like to see changed is the way that is done. So this property was previously condemned back in, when was it, 2006? Or correct, 2006. Under previous ownership. Problem is, when that changed hands at tax sale, you have to go back to step 1 and reissue the condemnation order with the new property owners, and it is not something that is automatically associated with the purchasing of the property at tax sale. And that's something that we'd like to see changed. And we are going to be having conversations with the county about how we can reform it, and I've already had conversations about reforming the law on the state level. So an immediate condemnation order with a 5-day warning and a request of charges of reckless endangerment, which is a misdemeanor charge. I'd just like to add, and happy to take your questions, that this situation is very different than the situation surrounding Bishop Sullivan. As I've said repeatedly, Bishop Sullivan was arrested at the scene because Bishop Sullivan had outstanding warrants for his arrest. It really had nothing to do with the building collapse that evening. That was a separate matter, and he was charged with reckless endangerment. But in that instance, the paper trail was very clear. There was a whole series of citations very immediately preceding that collapse. And regardless, I feel the charge is warranted in both cases, and that's why we've asked the DA to bring the charge. But the city is not going to bring a charge on its own without cooperation and support from the DA's office. I'm joined here today by Chief Carter, Captain Cleary, and Codes Inspector Dave Patton, and we would be happy to answer any other questions you have about this property or our war on blight in general.
So this will go through the housing court?
This would go to the housing, actually no, the housing court is starting on Monday. Yeah. So this would not go to the housing court. We announced yesterday, boy, everything is a blur, that the housing court would start on Monday. So all cases, all codes-related cases filed starting Monday go to the housing court. Anything that has happened up to that time goes to the magisterial district justice, who is that in this case?
I believe this will be Marcia Stewart.
Marcia Stewart.
I believe so.
How
Yes.
go ahead.
That's right, one at a time. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Well, just to start where you left off, why you have a police department and a codes department. Why couldn't the officers here, Chief, maybe you can address this, or Mayor, why not just file your own reckless endangerment charges? You guys have the arrest powers, right?
Because it is standard protocol to, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to speak out of turn, but it's to confer with the DA's office before bringing charges. In the case of the Sullivan matter, with the outstanding documentation that existed, the DA's office signed off on that evening, and there was no issue. In this instance, the DA's office has asked for more time to review the history and was not prepared to bring those charges yet, despite our urging that they be brought.
How does Mr. Wiest spell his last name?
W-I-E-S-T. It is Ronald Wiest Jr.
Okay, so you'd mentioned there is him. Is there a second owner as well?
Yes, there's a second owner as well, who happens to live in Long Island, New York, by the name of Ruben Valencia, V-A-L-E-N-C-I-A, and he will receive his notification through the mail.
So are they co-owners of the property,
No,
or is it two separate?
Sorry, two separate properties. One is 1144 Derry Street, and the other is 1146 Derry Street. And they both basically collapsed. So one owned by an owner in New York, one owned by an owner in Harrisburg. And the owner in Harrisburg received and signed for the condemnation order today. And our goal would be to bring misdemeanor charges against both. But that is pending District Attorney Marsico making a decision.
Who owns which one? Who owns 44 and who owns 46?
Valencia owns 44 and Ronald Wiest owns 46.
So both properties are condemned, but Ronald Wiest is the only one who has been charged so far.
No,
No.
both Ronald Wiest has already received his code's condemnation order because he lives locally. He received it this morning. He signed for it. For Mr. Valencia, it will have to be mailed. Correct?
So the property that was condemned in 2006, that was both properties were condemned at that time, or just one of them?
I was referring to the property owned by Mr. Wiest at 1146 Derry Street. Do you know when the other property was condemned?
It was probably around 2005.
So what was the issue that you had mentioned about when the tax sale happens, it doesn't automatically associate? So would you have had to have then turned around and issued another condemnation order at that point, or what did happen? What should have happened?
I'll let you speak to that.
That's exactly what, every time a property is sold, the current condemnation order doesn't travel with that property, and that's kind of what's really the crux of our problem, because they're just bought and sold, routinely. We're unaware of a lot of the transfers that take place, not just at the tax sale, but actually throughout the state and from state to state. Just a conversation I had with the county just today, there's an individual in Australia that's trying to buy property, another person in Israel that's trying to buy property here. This is kind of what we're up against. It's very problematic, and trying to keep track of that is almost physically impossible.
We'd like the policy to change, whereby if you purchase a property at tax sale which is condemned, you receive at that same time a condemnation order from the city of Harrisburg. But that would require change. We'd also like to change the state law to make it possible for corporations to register their officers and to have local agents, so that we can have a better sense of who is actually owning these properties.
So in terms of change, do you need some sort of central database that keeps all this? Do you even have anything like that now? What exactly is it that you need to change to make that happen?
I think we'd like to change the way the tax sale system is working in Harrisburg. That's really what we need. The point is that you can issue a condemnation order to a property owner, but then he can just turn around and sell it to somebody else, and then you have to start the process again. And then it could go get sold to somebody in Australia, and then go back on eBay, and the next thing you know, it's somebody there. And so even though this property was condemned, and we had issued condemnation orders, we hadn't gotten a condemnation order to Mr. Wiest. And and sometimes it's very difficult, from what I understand, to determine exactly who owns which property and when they purchased it, and it's a problem. I'd like the message to be, if you're speculating in property in Harrisburg that is condemned, you're going to get charged with reckless endangerment if that property poses an imminent threat or collapses on an occupied neighbor. This is not a game. This is not speculate. This is speculation which is reckless. It defines recklessness because these individuals are purchasing properties, doing nothing to fix them up, and it's only a matter of time before a condemned property is going to collapse.
Do these individuals actually really know what they're getting on this tax sale? Do they really know the condition that it's in and that it is condemned? Are they seeing this stuff online and thinking it looks one way, and then they get there and they're like, oh, whoa, I can't handle it? I mean,
I think that's the problem with the whole system, isn't it? Yes, that's right. I think Mr. Wiest said he didn't realize he actually bought this property. I mean, which is a pretty preposterous system, on its face. But nonetheless, he did buy this property. And there is evidence, frankly, that he knew that the property was unstable, and he made some unpermitted repairs to the property, which may or may not have contributed to its collapse. And you can't miss the X on the property. And trust me, in order to be condemned and to have an X on the property, as the fire chief has explained, these are properties that the fire department won't even go inside. It's that obvious to anyone that the building poses a threat to its neighbors. And unless we get serious and start charging these property owners with misdemeanor charges, we're limited to citations, which can be paid, and which, what's the maximum fine for one of the, a condemnation order?
$1,000.
$1,000.
That's
so
very rare you can get that.
$1,000. He'll be fined $1,000.
No, that's usually it's a sliding scale from $50 to $1,000, and it's very rare that we'll receive maximum fines, even on something that's a clear present public safety hazard.
So let me make it clear, we've asked the DA not only to bring charges in the case of this building that collapsed, but to allow us to bring charges against other condemned properties in Harrisburg that have not been addressed by their owners and that are in danger of imminent collapse. We want those to be misdemeanors. We're pushing for it. I think that's what the public wants. I think that's what public safety requires, but we have to do this in a cooperative fashion with the district attorney's office, and we will have follow-up meetings, and we are interested in getting tough on this issue. We have to recognize that what we've done historically up to this point hasn't worked. So we need new options, and one of those options is to raise the level to misdemeanor charges.
For the neighbors who were evacuated, is the damage so bad that their building could potentially be condemned at some point too, or is that damage reparable? Or
I don't believe there's any danger of their building being condemned. You were
Which
just there.
building is
Yes.
that?
I'm sorry?
Which building is that?
1146 and a half.
What happens is, I believe what I've been told is that the imminent danger for the neighbors now has passed because the portion that could have collapsed on them did collapse on them. And luckily, they weren't harmed, though they were displaced.
Are they back in their home today?
I think they would like to go back to their home, and I haven't gotten the latest. We've been assisting the family, and I think their plan is to go back. I think they feel safe because, again, the portion of the property next to them that could have collapsed on them already has. The building is still structurally unsafe, but I believe the opinion is it's not going to collapse in such a way that it could fall on their home.
A question for Mr. Patton. Is there the mayor referenced like a no real paper trail on the two properties in question here, but is there a history of codes violations at the properties that you can provide, or is it, or does that stop once they get condemned because they're condemned?
No, usually when a property is condemned, then the citations just keep on going until, again, transfers. These have gone through several tax sales. The 1144, that remained in Kurt's ownership for quite some time, the one that's in New York. So there's a lot of citations and warrants, 5 warrants for his arrest for that particular property.
5 warrants for Mr. Valencia?
Yes.
Really? Okay.
Actually, public complaints section for 1146, the last actual citizen complaint that we got was 1997. So that's why what presents the problem. A lot of times we only know the change of ownership when we get a particular complaint from the general public, or we happen to be in that general area, which we were, which is why we condemned it on several other occasions.
But the point is, you could have 7 different owners and 6 different condemnation orders for the first 6, but the 7th person, despite the fact that all this history exists for the property, that person can claim that they don't have notice because we haven't yet gotten the condemnation order, which is why when they shift so easily from owner to owner and out of state and back in, it's a real problem. We need the condemnation orders to sort of travel with the purchase of the property. That's clearly what needs to happen. This tax system has to be reformed. We're going to work here, and maybe we can be precedent setting here in Dauphin County.
Well, does the city routinely get a notice for any sale of a property? I mean, I would imagine you would get some notice of a sale of a property.
We do get notice of potential purchasers, and one of the problems is not all the people that are on that list may purchase a property. They may purchase that property or go to the sale and give a bid for that property in June, but the deed doesn't actually change till months later. I mean, you have to be due diligence and keeps checking it for all these properties to see if they actually transferred or not. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes they'll be sold in June, but they won't actually have a transfer until September or October. So they just stay in that kind of limbo state where you really have no rightful owner during the whole slice of time. If anything would happen, you don't have any particular owner to go after, so
Yeah.
there really is no ownership during
But,
those.
but I'm thinking like even in, I mean, when a property changes hands and when a deed is executed, doesn't the city get a routine, even if it's the tax collectors, or maybe that's the wage tax bureau or well, whoever collects the property tax in Harrisburg, wouldn't they get a notice of who they have to bill the property tax to?
Our registrar gets the information electronically from county.
Okay.
And it just travels through that kind of mechanism.
So I guess what I'm wondering, like, is there some onus, do you feel there's some onus on the city to perhaps keep a better track of who's owning the properties in the city?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that we've really tried to do here since taking office. Mr. Patton will attest to the fact that I said, how big is our condemnation list? What is it? The very fact that we know we have 346 properties is because we have compiled that list, and that list was not compiled previous to taking office. We were dealing with demolition in a very sort of reactive way. We weren't actively looking at where those condemned properties are, and we now have the fire chief and the fire department going out and re-inspecting all of those properties. And we are going to need to focus on keeping track of ownership for each of those properties. And there is definitely more that the city can do. So we'll take our share of the responsibility for that. But we've done a lot in a short period of time just to try and get a list of those properties and to begin the process of strategically dealing with them.
Mayor, did I hear you right that you want this building taken down within the next 5 days?
Yeah, it will be taken down as soon as the PA1 call and thing. Can you talk about the demolition schedule?
Yes, fortunately, we're available to move on site, actually move on site as we speak. We were getting ready to engage a property on Hunter Street, but we haven't gotten too deep in it. And the one call has already been made. Electric is being terminated, the remains of the property. So by next week, we should be engaging in demolition of both properties.
Yesterday, Mr. Patton, during the Housing Court press conference, you mentioned that this is really put together so that these people who own these properties will take control of their properties, take them under control. If, say, this homeowner decides to take the building down himself, would there be any possibility of him not getting such, fines or something like that? Or is it too late?
No, I think I said that it's at a point of mitigation, but he doesn't have the resources to take down the property. So I spoke with him this morning, when he signed for the condemnation order. He clearly didn't have the resources. He feels as though, at least from what I'm told, that he was deceived with purchasing the property. They view the picture that's on the Dauphin County website, and that's not an updated picture. It's like the last update, I believe, was 2001. So it's not a really proper depiction as to what actually that property looks like. And that's what happened to recently an individual in Florida. He just sat in the comfort of his living room buying 2 properties off the repository, looking at that picture, and now he feels feels deceived that he's now getting condemnation orders for these properties, and clearly then they have their backs to him.
I don't have a lot of sympathy for that, because you shouldn't be speculating in properties and be so detached from them that you don't even know what you're buying. But nonetheless, I think you're explaining the situation. And the other thing that that points to is the problem of allowing people to buy properties at the tax sales without any means to do anything with them, let alone have the means to tear them down. There's no means to do anything. And that's another state law that we'd like to see change, which requires them posting some sort of a bond or a assurance that they have resources. And why we allow this to happen where anyone can buy anything clearly beyond their ability to do something with is a part of the problem. So I think there's plenty of blame to go around, but I still want to focus on, I think we can use this as an opportunity to have a serious conversation about whether or not bringing misdemeanor charges of reckless endangerment is going to have a positive effect. And I would say it would. I think it would cause people to think twice. If they knew that in Harrisburg you ended up buying one of these properties, doing nothing with it, you might get charged with a misdemeanor. That's a much greater deterrent, I think, than simply a small fine.
And to point to that, a misdemeanor, if that misdemeanor doesn't happen, then all he'll get is the fine, and the city will pay for it to be demolished. Is that correct?
Yes, the city has an in-house demolition team, and we will just make this our next priority. And we're actually going to, since we're going to be there, we're also going to take down, it looks like 1145 Derry Street at the same time. So we'll take down 1144, 46, and 45.
And that's the one directly across the street that's been abandoned?
That's right. And we'll be there, so we'll concentrate our resources. And again, city has limited means and budget. We'll take these down, but we can't take everything down. We'll lien the property, but ask yourself why somebody should be allowed to buy a property if they don't even have the means to pay for it to be demolished if it endangers the neighborhood.
Do you have a rough estimate for how much it'll cost to knock down all three of those properties?
I'd say for the 11, 44, and 46, it may come out to approximately maybe 20,000. The one across the street's going to be a little bit more complex because we have two party walls, so that'll probably end up being somewhere in the neighborhood of 25, 28,000. And they'll get the lien and civil suit. They'll get their 30-day invoice, and then after that, that's what triggers the lien and the civil suit against the property owner.
What do you mean by that? Does the city go back for those costs against the property owner?
We absolutely try to get restitution.
Oh, okay.
We rarely get it, but we make every effort to try.
So if you do get that restitution, does it go back into the demolition budget?
Yes, it does. Program income.
Can you explain why it is you rarely get it? I mean, why?
Because most of the properties are on a particular level of sale where you can buy these properties, but for a filing fee, you can wipe out any kind of liens, any kind of tax liens, utility liens. I think it's a $20-some filing fee for each action on that property, so you can get it free and clear at the judicial and repository.
So the property gets demolished, they sell a land parcel, and then for a fee on that land parcel?
The land remains in the property owner's name.
Right.
And most of the time, it'll end up back on the tax sale again. Usually what we try and do is if we're demolishing something that's adjoining another property owner, we try and assist them in every way we can that's on that tax sale to increase their real estate by purchasing that property for the minimum fee of, I think it's $500. So we do
That's
make
the
every
fine.
effort because then that gets it back, at least back on the tax rolls and enhances their property.
But I think the real question is we rarely get restitution because the people that are speculating this don't have the means.
I think over the course of when we were doing demolition, maybe 5 times.
And we should change that.
Absolutely.
And just to be clear about the demolitions, that looks like that could happen next week, but do you have to, that would be for the Weast property, but do you actually have to get a signed letter back from Ruben Valencia before you can do his? Okay, you can actually just go ahead and...
Yes, he's already has the condemnation order. He hasn't appealed anything since he initially issued it, so that gives us the right to go on the property and do as we wish.
Okay. Yeah, and both of these properties work in Derry.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the other thing I just wanted to ask is, do they get, are they at risk for any new fines or citations code-wise, or that would be now in the purview of the DA, and if you file reckless endangerment charges. I mean, they're gonna lose the buildings, but, and they'll have liens attached to the property, but there's no actual fine at this point. That's pending the reckless endangerment decision, is that right?
And the other fines that are in warrant, there's probably little chance we're gonna see those, since there's some regions in that state.
Mr. Valencia.
Yes.
I mean, the condemning the property and tearing it down for Mr. Weiss is pretty much all you can do from a code standpoint. And then the misdemeanor would be a separate matter.
Okay.
All right then, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.